Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frata Eleftheria, and I talk a lot about the Kabbalah on this channel, different themes within the Kabbalah, and tonight I want to talk about a lesser known idea that exists in Kabbalah as well as just mainstream Judaism, and that is the concept of Tikkun Olam, or repairing the world, or perhaps fixing or healing the world. And I thought that this would be an appropriate topic because, there's a lot of other things I've spoken about in terms of Kabbalah, but this is adding another dimension to that knowledge that doesn't always get covered as frequently in some of the Western esoteric schools down through the years. But I think is one of the most important and beautiful concepts within the Kabbalah. And I think that it's important to talk about it now as well because just look around at what's happening in the world right now. The wars that are happening, the political divisions that are happening, the way that we are just out of balance with each other and with the world around us. This is a world that is in need of fixing. And before we even think about fixing the problem, we have to get to the root of the problem. And what the solution is that can get to that root. And that is what the idea of Tikkun Olam tries to do. So I think what I might do is I might talk about Tikkun Olam in the kind of exoteric meaning of that term, the way that it's used in mainstream Judaism. That's probably the easiest kind of idea of Tikkun Olam to grasp. And then from there I will look at what the Kabbalah says about Tikkun Olam, specifically the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria and his kind of innovations to Kabbalah. So what is the kind of mainstream understanding of Tikkun Olam? Well, it's often seen as fixing the world through good deeds. This can be taken as the mitzvot, following the commandments, or it can be taken, if you want to go even further, to mean acts of social justice. So looking at the different ways that people are treated unfairly in this world and unfair relationships and power dynamics, and trying to overcome divisions between people, and so bringing the world closer to a state of harmony and unity and wholeness, which is ultimately what God wants, and it's what we can expect in the Messianic era. And it's about bringing that Messianic era closer to fruition by engaging in acts which are going to improve the world that we live in. Move towards a world where there is no war, no poverty, and so on. And so that is how we can understand Tikkun Olam. So that's a very easy to understand idea, and it very much deals with the world that we're familiar with. But Tikkun Olam is also a feature of Kabbalistic beliefs, and it tends to take a more kind of mystical or esoteric kind of interpretation in that context. So we can understand Tikkun Olam as going to the root of human nature. And we can see this even in the more exoteric expressions of this idea, that there is something in human nature that went wrong in the Garden of Eden and caused a separation between humanity and God, and separation between one another, covering their nakedness and shame, having knowledge of good and evil, which really is the introduction of seeing things as evil, because there was only a perception of good before. What the tree of knowledge really introduced was that kind of separation of everything into dualities, and so a division of the wholeness. And so that is the root of the wound in our world, in our society, is that sense of separation, and it's related to ego as well. And so what we need to come to realize is that we are all one, and that God is one. And so that is kind of how the process of Tikkun Olam has to play out. Returning to that knowledge, to that understanding. At least in my kind of limited study of this topic, that's what it seems to mean to me. And in Lurianic Kabbalah, which is one kind of stream of Kabbalah, the source of the brokenness of the world is explained in terms of, the very process of primordial emanations from out of the divine, from out of the limitless light, as the sephiroth of the tree of life were being created. And there's this story of the breaking of the vessels where in the created universe, in order to contain the light of God, of the divine, a series of vessels were created in the form of the sephiroth to contain that light. But the light was so intense that it broke the vessels, and then it scattered the light everywhere into pieces and sundered it into pieces, and the shells fell down into darkness, and pieces of the light got stuck to them and dragged down into the darkness with them, and that formed the kind of qlipphoth world of the distorted or broken creation, the world of darkness. And this is really an explanation for why there is evil and imperfection in the world, and why the world seems to be broken in some way, because that wholeness is missing, because there is disharmony and there is disunity. And the way that Lurianic Kabbalah explains that God's chosen method for repairing the breaches, for repairing the brokenness of the world, was by creating the Adam Kadmon, which is the primordial man, who would be a microcosm of the macrocosm of the tree of life and contain the tree of life within himself. And so by replicating the tree of life in a new perfect image, the energies of the various sephiroth could be aligned again in a harmonious unity. And so I think that there is a underlying message here about how the way to repair the brokenness of the world as we perceive it is ultimately something that begins as an internal process. We need to perfect ourselves into an image or an expression of the Adam Kadmon, and align all of those energies of creation into a state of wholeness and harmony within ourselves. And that's kind of the thing that is going to form the blueprint by which we can then repair the rest of the world, the brokenness of the rest of the world. And then another dimension of this is that there's a bunch of divine sparks that are scattered throughout the world. And in order to heal creation, the sparks need to be regathered together and reunited. And ultimately, it is about the unification of the human race. Not in the way that the Tower of Babel was meant to do, which is, in defiance of God's order. And there are people who are trying to unify the world in defiance of God's order today as well. And they tell you that you own nothing and be happy. But that is not the way that the world is going to be healed. There is another way which will prevail for uniting humanity under God's law, and that is the thing that will prevail in the end. And it has nothing to do with establishing systems of power or control. It has everything to do with awakening the divinity within each person throughout the entire world. And so the idea of Tikkun Olam is all about bringing light to the darkness and repairing the brokenness that we seem to intuit is the natural state of humanity, or not the natural state as it was initially intended, but what it has been for at least the last few thousand years. And so, at the root of all of the other ways that we feel that there's something wrong with the world in terms of, the kind of economic systems that we have that are unfair, the governments that we have that are not serving the people, the unjust laws that there are, the harmful kind of cultural norms that there are, all of the things that we see that are not quite right with the way that our society is. It all has a spiritual root. It all has to do with that spiritual state of disconnection and being stuck in the world of darkness, in the world of the qlipphoth, and cut off from our true purpose and cut off from the light, which is the light of God. And it's really also about revealing the true reason behind creation as well. This Tikkun Olam helps us to reveal the reason why there are separate individuals in the world. As painful as it is to feel a sense of separation from others in place of love or understanding or community, and so we get this idea that separativity takes us further away from grace. There is a purpose behind it, because in Kabbalah, God wants to love, express the unconditional love of God, but needs another to be able to share that love with. And that is one explanation as to why there is this separation between the Creator and the creation, so that relationship of love can be established. And so when we see separation that way, it is a way that we can more fully express the design or the will of God, rather than something which takes us further away from it. And so perhaps the real problem is our perspective and getting lost in that separation and not being able to see beyond it. And so perhaps it is not so much the world that needs to be fixed or repaired, but our perception of the world and our place in the world and how we relate to the world that is the thing that needs to be fixed. And the mysteries, the ancient wisdom tells us how we can do that. And I've demonstrated that tonight in the context of Kabbalah. But there are many different kind of scales and many different ways in which this putting the pieces of the broken world back together again can be understood. And I've been thinking a lot about it recently, and so I wanted to share my insights into Tikkun Olam with you tonight. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to my channel to support my work, and if you want to support me further, hit join all thanks down below. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.